My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 29, and at my sister's wedding, my mother smirked when she announced, "Lauren will play a song for us all tonight." She thought she was setting me up for shame in front of 200 guests, but the music I played ended her smile forever. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you are watching from. The smile was the first thing I noticed. It wasn't one of her polite society smiles, the one she reserved for members of the country club or the wives of my father's business partners. This one was sharp and private, a little secret she was enjoying all by herself, even while standing at a microphone in a ballroom filled with 200 people. It was a smile that said, "I've won," and it was, aimed directly at me. "And now," my mother Caroline said, her voice smooth as cream, "for a special treat, my eldest daughter Lauren is going to play a little something for us." A polite, scattered applause rippled through the room. A few heads turned in my direction, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and mild pity. I was sitting at a small, circular table near the back, tucked away behind a large floral arrangement, exactly where I had been placed. I was a footnote at my own sister's wedding, my mother's eyes locked with mine across the expanse of white linen, crystal glasses, and smiling faces. That little smirk widened just a fraction. It was a look I knew better than my own reflection. It was the look she got right before she clipped my wings. It was the look of a predator cornering its prey, not with teeth and claws, but with a quiet, devastating certainty. She thought she had me. She believed that forcing me onto that stage, in front of a crowd that had spent the last hour celebrating my sister Emily's perfection, would be the final, public confirmation of what she'd always believed, that I was the awkward one, the clumsy afterthought, the failure. She envisioned fumbled notes, a shaky voice, and a performance so cringeworthy that it would make Emily's day shine even brighter by comparison. A little bit of tragic comedy to break up the perfectly orchestrated elegance. I felt the familiar, cold dread coil in my stomach. It was a feeling I'd carried since childhood, the instinct to shrink, to disappear into the wallpaper and pray no one noticed me. For a second, every muscle in my body screamed at me to stay seated, to shake my head, to refuse. But then I looked past her, at my sister Emily, who was sitting at the head table in her cloud of white tulle, giggling into her new husband's ear. She glanced over at me, a flicker of that same cruel amusement in her eyes. She was in on the joke. She always was. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The cold dread didn't vanish, but it solidified. It turned from fear into focus. The trembling in my hands wasn't from panic anymore. It was from a tightly coiled energy, a resolve that had been building for 29 years. They wanted a performance. They wanted a show. I was going to give them one, just not the one they were expecting. I stood up, smoothed down the simple navy dress I was wearing, and began the long walk toward the grand piano on the stage. With every step, I could feel my mother's triumphant gaze on my back. She thought she was leading me to my slaughter. She had no idea she was leading me to my freedom. Her mocking smile was the last thing I saw before I turned my back on her and faced the music. To understand that smile, you have to understand my mother. And to understand my mother, you have to understand the house I grew up in. It was a beautiful, sprawling colonial in a quiet suburb of Columbus, Ohio, with a perfectly manicured lawn and a porch swing that was mostly for show. From the outside, it was a picture of American domestic bliss. Inside, it was a quiet, cold war zone, and I was on the losing side from the day I was born. My mother, Caroline, was a woman who valued appearances above all else. She collected beautiful things, antique furniture, expensive art, and a daughter who looked like a doll. That daughter was Emily. Born 2 years after me, Emily was everything I wasn't. She had my mother's blonde hair, my father's easy smile, and a natural charm that made people lean in and listen. She was graceful, pretty, and effortlessly popular. She was a reflection of everything Caroline wanted to be, and my mother polished that reflection until it gleamed. I, on the other hand, was a smudge on the family portrait. I was born with a shock of dark, unruly hair, pale skin, and a serious, watchful expression. I was clumsy, shy, and preferred the company of books to people. Where Emily glided, I tripped. Where Emily charmed, I stood awkwardly in the corner, feeling like I was wearing clothes that were 2 sizes too small. My mother made it clear, in 1,000 small ways, that I was a disappointment. It was never a single, dramatic declaration. It was a slow, steady drip of disapproval that eroded my sense of self-worth before I even knew what that was. It was in the way she'd sigh when I'd come home with dirt on my knees from exploring the woods behind our house. "Look at you, Lauren. Always a mess. Why can't you be more like your sister?" Emily would be inside, playing with her dolls, her little dresses perfectly clean. Family gatherings were a masterclass in this quiet cruelty. They were always held at our house because my mother loved to host. The rooms would be filled with the scent of her famous pot roast and the sound of polite chatter. Emily would be at the center of it all, a little princess holding court. She'd show off her latest dance recital steps or tell a charming story that made all the adults laugh. My mother would watch her with a look of adoration so intense it was almost painful to witness. My role was to be invisible. I would help set the table, then find a quiet corner with a book. But my mother would inevitably find a way to draw me out, not to praise me, but to use me as a prop. "Lauren, come say hello to your Aunt Carol," she'd call out, her voice a little too loud. When I'd shyly approach, she'd place a hand on my head and say, with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes, "This is my little bookworm. We can't get her nose out of a story. I just don't know where she gets it from." It sounded like a compliment, but the subtext was clear. She's strange. She's not like us. My father, Mark, was a ghost in our house. He worked long hours at his law firm, and when he was home, he sought peace at all costs. He saw the dynamic. He saw the way Caroline favored Emily, the way she dismissed me. But confronting my mother would have meant a fight, and my father hated conflict more than anything. So he stayed silent. His silence was a form of agreement, a quiet endorsement of my mother's verdict on me. He would sometimes give me a quick, sympathetic look when my mother made a particularly sharp comment, but he never, ever stepped in. He chose his wife over his daughter, every single time, and in doing so, he taught me that my pain wasn't worth fighting for. The hierarchy was set early. Emily was the sun. I was a distant, forgotten planet, cold and in shadow. She was the one whose artwork was framed and hung in the hallway. Mine was tucked into a drawer. She was the one whose friends were welcomed with open arms and freshly baked cookies. My friends, on the rare occasion I had one over, were treated with a polite but distinct coolness, as if they were tracking in mud. I learned to live in these margins. I found my solace in stories, in the worlds between the pages of a book where I could be anyone I wanted, and I found my voice, not in speaking, but in music. Our house had an old, out-of-tune upright piano in the living room that no one ever touched. It was more of a furniture piece than an instrument. When I was about 8, I started tinkering with it, picking out melodies from the radio. I discovered I had a good ear. I could hear a song and, with a little time, figure out how to play it. The piano became my sanctuary. It was the one place in the house that was truly mine. I'd spend hours there, my fingers finding patterns on the keys, creating sounds that felt more honest than any words I could say. It was a language I was fluent in, a world where I was in control. It was the only place my mother's judgment couldn't reach me, or so I thought. My mother viewed my music as she viewed everything else about me, a strange and inconvenient hobby. It was noise. It was a mess. It was time I could be spending on something more productive, like helping Emily with her pageant routines or learning how to set a table properly for a dinner party. The first time I truly understood the depth of her disdain was when I was 15. I had been taking piano lessons for a few years, lessons I paid for myself with money from a weekend job at the local library. My teacher, a kind, elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, encouraged me to enter a regional music competition. I had written my first real song, a simple, melancholic instrumental piece. I poured all my loneliness, all my quiet yearning, into that melody. To my complete shock, I won. I remember standing on the stage of the high school auditorium, a cheap, plastic trophy in my hand, my heart pounding with a feeling I'd never experienced before. Pride. People were clapping for me, for something I had created. I practically floated home. I burst through the front door, holding the trophy like it was the Olympic torch. "Mom! Dad! I won!" The first time I truly understood the depth of her disdain was when I was 15. I had been taking piano lessons for a few years, lessons I paid for myself with money from a weekend job at the local library. My teacher, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, encouraged me to enter a regional music competition. I had written my first real song, a simple, melancholic instrumental piece. I poured all my loneliness, all my quiet yearning, into that melody. To my complete shock, I won. I remember standing on the stage of the high school auditorium, a cheap, plastic trophy in my hand, my heart pounding with a feeling I'd never experienced before. Pride. People were clapping for me, for something I had created. I practically floated home. I burst through the front door, holding the trophy like it was the Olympic torch. "Mom! Dad! I won!" My father was reading the newspaper in his armchair. He looked up and gave me a tired smile. "That's great, honey. Good for you." He went right back to his paper. My mother was in the kitchen on the phone. She held up a finger, signaling for me to wait. Emily was at the kitchen table, meticulously applying glitter to a poster for her student council campaign. She didn't even look up. I waited, the plastic of the trophy getting slippery in my sweaty hands. The initial thrill was already starting to fade, replaced by the familiar feeling of being an interruption. Finally, my mother hung up the phone. "What is it, Lauren?" she asked, her tone impatient. I held up the trophy. I won the competition. First place. She glanced at it, her eyes flat and unimpressed. She picked up a dish rag and wiped down a perfectly clean countertop. "Oh, that's nice," she said. Then she turned to my sister. "Emily, honey, show Lauren the proofs from your modeling shoot. The photographer just dropped them off." Emily's face lit up. She slid a large manila envelope across the table. "They came out so good. Mr. Henderson said I'm a natural." My mother picked up the glossy 8x10 photos, her entire demeanor changing. Her face softened, her eyes glowed. She cooed over the images of Emily posing in a series of brightly colored outfits. "Oh, look at this one. You look like a professional model, sweetie. This is what matters. This could be a career." She fanned the photos out on the counter. "We need to get these framed immediately." My trophy was still in my hand. It felt heavy and stupid. She hadn't even asked to see it. She hadn't asked what song I played. She hadn't asked how I felt. My accomplishment was a speck of dust to be wiped away to make room for Emily's shine. I quietly went up to my room and put the trophy on my bookshelf, behind a stack of books. It felt like hiding evidence of a crime. The crime of hoping, for just a moment, that I might be enough. This pattern repeated itself endlessly. When I begged for proper music lessons with a better teacher, my mother claimed they couldn't afford it. "It's a frivolous expense, Lauren. A hobby is one thing, but we have to be practical." Weeks later, she wrote a check for $2,000 for Emily to attend a week-long beauty and confidence retreat in preparation for the Miss Teen Ohio pageant. I saw the receipt on her desk. When I got a near-perfect score on my SATs, my father grunted his approval from behind the sports page. That same week, Emily got the lead in the high school play, and my parents threw a celebratory dinner for her, inviting all her friends. My SAT score was never mentioned again. My very existence was a quiet inconvenience to them. I was the responsible one, the one who got good grades and never got into trouble. But those qualities were not currency in our household. Charm was currency. Beauty was currency. My quiet diligence was seen as a lack of personality. I learned to stop seeking their approval. I retreated further into my music. I started writing lyrics, filling notebooks with verses about feeling invisible, about living in a house that wasn't a home, about the ache of being unloved. The songs were my secret diary, the only place I could be completely honest. I never played them for anyone. They were too raw, too real. They were all I had. The years went by. I went to the state university, paying my own way with scholarships and part-time jobs. Emily went to a private art school to study fashion design, her tuition paid in full by my parents. I moved into a small apartment after graduation and got a job as a music teacher at an elementary school. It didn't pay much, but I loved it. I loved seeing the spark in a child's eyes when they finally mastered a chord or played their first song. I was giving them what I had never gotten: encouragement. A voice telling them they were good enough. Meanwhile, Emily lived a charmed life, bankrolled by our parents. She moved to a trendy apartment downtown, started a fashion blog, and got engaged to a handsome, wealthy man from a prominent family. And that's when my mother began planning the event of the season. The wedding was my mother's magnum opus. It was her chance to showcase her success as a mother and a socialite. The success, of course, was Emily. The wedding was a testament to the perfect daughter she had raised. From the moment Emily announced her engagement, our family life, which already revolved around her, went into hyperdrive. The talk was of nothing else. Venues, caterers, floral arrangements, guest lists. My mother was in her element, a general commanding an army of event planners and designers. My role in this grand production was to be an extra, a silent background, character. I wasn't asked for my opinion on anything. I wasn't invited to the dress fittings or the cake tastings. I found out Emily had chosen her bridesmaids when I saw the happy, smiling pictures she posted on Instagram. A group of her sorority sisters, all of them blonde and bubbly, just like her. I wasn't one of them. It stung, but it didn't surprise me. A bridesmaid is supposed to compliment the bride. I was a jarring note in her perfect composition. I was expected to show up, to smile, and to applaud. That was all. And honestly, I was fine with that. The less involved I was, the better. I bought a simple, elegant navy dress, something that would allow me to blend in, and I prepared myself to endure the day with quiet dignity. Then, about a week before the wedding, my mother cornered me. I had stopped by the house to drop off a Tia birthday gift for my dad. The place was in a state of controlled chaos. Boxes of wedding favors were stacked in the hall, and lists were taped to every surface. My mother was on the phone, her voice sharp and commanding. When she saw me, she ended her call abruptly. "Lauren, I need to talk to you," she said, not as a request, but as a summons. She led me into the formal living room, the one with the out-of-tune piano. It was the only room in the house that still felt like a piece of me was in it. She didn't sit. She stood in the center of the room, her arms crossed, her face set in a look of grim determination. "I've been thinking," she began, which was always a warning sign. "The reception schedule is all set, but it feels like it's missing a personal touch." I stayed silent, waiting. Emily's father-in-law is giving a speech, of course, and her maid of honor. But I thought we should have something from our side, something from her sister. My heart gave a small, hopeful flutter. Was this it? Was she finally giving me a real role? Maybe she wanted me to give a toast, to say a few words. "You're going to perform," she stated. The flutter died instantly, replaced by a cold knot of dread. "Perform what?" "A song, of course. On the piano." She gestured towards the old upright. "You're always tinkering away on that thing. It's time you put it to good use." I stared at her. "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. It's Emily's day. The focus should be on her and Richard." "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "It will be a lovely, sentimental moment. A sister playing for her sister on her wedding day. People will love it." Her tone made it clear this wasn't an honor. It was a command. And the look in her eyes told me the real reason. This wasn't about a sentimental moment. This was about control. This was about her creating a narrative. She knew I hated performing in front of people. She knew I was intensely private about my music. This was her way of forcing me out into the light, on her terms, to be judged by her people. She was staging my humiliation as a touching family tribute. "What do you want? Me to play?" I asked, my voice flat. "Oh, something light and cheerful. That Pachelbel thing, maybe? Or something from a musical. Something people will recognize." She waved a dismissive hand. "You can figure it out. Just make sure it's appropriate. Nothing dreary." The word dreary was aimed at me, at the quiet, sad melodies I used to play when I thought no one was listening. "Mom, I'm not a wedding singer. I'm a teacher. I haven't performed publicly in years," I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. Her face hardened. "Lauren, do not be difficult. Not now. This wedding has to be perfect, and you will do your part. You will get up on that stage, and you will play a nice, pretty song to show everyone what a supportive, talented sister you are. You owe Emily that much." "Owe her?" I thought. "Owe her for what? For taking up all the air in the room my entire life?" But I didn't say it. I just nodded. Arguing was pointless. It was like arguing with a hurricane. You just had to board up the windows and wait for it to pass. "Good," she said, her voice softening now that she had gotten her way. "It's settled then." As I walked out of the house that day, I felt a familiar sense of helpless resignation. I was a pawn in her game, just as I had always been. I would play her cheerful little song, get through the 5 minutes of excruciating discomfort, and then retreat back into the shadows. That was the plan. But my mother had made one critical miscalculation. She thought she knew me. She thought I was still that shy, defeated little girl who would put her trophy behind a stack of books. She had no idea who I had become in the quiet, in the music, in the years of being ignored. She had pushed me one time too many. The wedding rehearsal was held the evening before the main event at the country club. The ballroom was mostly empty, save for the wedding party, our parents, and the harried-looking wedding planner, who was clipboard deep in logistics. The place echoed with a nervous, excited energy. I was there because my mother insisted I run through my performance to check the sound levels. The real reason I knew was to give her a preview of the disaster she was anticipating. A dress, rehearsal for my humiliation. I sat at my designated table in the back while they practiced the procession. Emily glided down the makeshift aisle on our father's arm, beaming. My mother watched from the side, dabbing at a dry eye with a lace handkerchief for effect. It was all so theatrical, so perfectly staged. When they were done, the wedding planner called out, "Okay, and we have a performance from the bride's sister, Lauren. Lauren, are you ready to do a sound check?" All heads turned to me. I felt a hot blush creep up my neck. I nodded and walked towards the stage, my heels clicking awkwardly on the polished dance floor. The piano was a beautiful, gleaming black grand, far more impressive than the old upright at home. It was intimidating. I sat down and played a few chords of the cheerful, generic piece I had chosen, a Mozart sonata. It was technically proficient and emotionally empty, perfect for the occasion. As I played, I could hear my mother's voice. She was standing near the head table, talking to Emily. She wasn't whispering. She was speaking in a stage whisper, one loud enough for anyone nearby, and specifically me to hear. "This is just going to be hilarious," she said, her voice dripping with a syrupy, malicious glee. "Can you imagine? Little Lauren up there in front of everyone? She'll probably forget the notes. Everyone will finally see what a joke she is." I heard Emily's high-pitched giggle in response. "Mom, stop. You're terrible," she said, but there was no force behind it. She was enjoying it. My fingers froze on the keys. The sound of their voices, the casual cruelty of their words, hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just an insult. It was the summary of my entire life. A joke. That's what I was. To them. My feelings. My talent. My very existence. It was all just a source of amusement. In that moment, standing in a nearly empty ballroom, with their laughter echoing in my ears, 29 years of suppressed anger, hurt, and silent screams coalesced into a single, diamond-hard point of clarity. I had been planning to just survive the wedding, to play their game, swallow my pride, and get through it. But survival wasn't enough anymore. I wasn't going to be their joke. I wasn't going to be their cautionary tale. If they wanted a performance, if they wanted to put me in the spotlight, then I was going to use that light to show them the truth. I lifted my hands from the keys and took a slow, deep breath. I looked over at them. My mother caught my eye and gave me that smile again, that sharp, triumphant smirk. It was the same one she'd give me at the wedding. She thought she was looking at her defeated daughter. She had no idea she was looking at a stranger. A quiet resolve settled over me, calm and absolute. I would not play Mozart. I would not play their cheerful, meaningless tune. I would play my song, the one I had written years ago, hidden away in a notebook, the one that held all my secrets, all my pain, and all my strength. The one I had titled The Wallpaper Daughter. It was a risky, terrifying thought, but the alternative, to sit there and let them laugh, was no longer an option. They had handed me a stage and a microphone. It was time I finally used my own voice. I finished the sound check, my fingers moving mechanically through the rest of the Mozart piece. The wedding planner gave me a thumbs up. I walked back to my table, my head held high. My mother and Emily had moved on, now discussing the seating chart. They had already forgotten about me. Good, I thought. Let them forget. Let them be surprised. Tomorrow, they would hear me. For the first and last time, they would truly hear me. The day of the wedding arrived, painted in shades of ivory and blush pink. The sun shone as if on cue. Everything was perfect, just as my mother had decreed. I got ready alone in my quiet apartment. I didn't have a gaggle of bridesmaids laughing and sharing champagne. It was just me, the silence, and my navy dress. I did my own hair and makeup, my hands surprisingly steady. I wasn't the nervous, trembling wreck my mother had envisioned. I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes after a storm has passed, and the path forward is clear. When I arrived at the country club, the place was already buzzing. The ballroom was breathtaking. It glowed under the light of a dozen crystal chandeliers. The tables were set with towering floral centerpieces, and a string quartet was playing softly in the corner. It was a fairy tale, a beautiful, expensive illusion. I saw my family from a distance. My father, looking dapper but slightly lost in his tuxedo. My mother, the queen bee, flitting from group to group, accepting compliments on her flawless event, and Emily, the radiant bride, surrounded by her court, laughing as a photographer captured every perfect moment. I was an island in a sea of their celebration. A few distant relatives gave me polite nods. I found my table at the back and sat down, a silent observer. The ceremony was beautiful. Emily and Richard exchanged their vows under a massive arch of white roses. My mother cried her perfectly rehearsed tears. My father looked proud. I felt a strange detachment, as if watching a movie. I felt happy for Emily, on some level. I didn't begrudge her this moment. I just wished for once that my own moments hadn't been treated as worthless in comparison. The reception began. The guests mingled. The champagne flowed. The speeches were made. Emily's maid of honor told a series of funny, heartwarming stories from their college days. Richard's father welcomed Emily into the family with a warm, loving toast. My father gave a short, generic speech about watching his little girl grow up. He mentioned me once, a passing reference, and her sister Lauren, who is here with us tonight. Then, after the cake was cut and the first dance was danced, my mother picked up the microphone, and she gave me that smile. "Let's give Lauren a moment of spotlight, shall we?" She sneered, her voice a weapon wrapped in velvet. The polite applause started again. The string quartet packed up their instruments, leaving the stage clear. All eyes turned to me. It was happening. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. The calm I had felt all day threatened to shatter. This was it. This was real. 200 pairs of eyes were on me. The weight of their expectations, of my mother's malice, pressed down on me. For a fleeting second, I thought, I can't do this. I'll just play Mozart and get it over with. But then I saw her face. My mother was radiating triumph. She was so sure of my failure, and that certainty was the spark that reignited my resolve. I would not fail. I would not falter. Not for her. Not anymore. I stood up from my table. I walked the long walk. The faces I passed were a blur. I could hear whispers. That's the other sister. The quiet one. I reached the stage and sat down at the gleaming black piano. I adjusted. The microphone. My hands trembling, but not from fear. It was from focus, from the sheer, terrifying power of what I was about to do. I looked out at the sea of faces, and I found my mother. She was watching me, her smirk firmly in place. I took a deep breath, placed my fingers on the keys, and closed my eyes. I didn't look at the crowd again. I looked inward, to the place where the music had lived, silently, for all these years, and I began to play. The first notes that filled the ballroom were not the bright, cheerful chords of Mozart. They were quiet, haunting, and melancholic, a simple, searching melody that seemed to hang in the air like a question. I could feel a ripple of confusion move through the room. This was not the light, celebratory music they were expecting. I saw my mother's smile flicker for a second. Her head tilted, a small frown forming between her perfectly plucked eyebrows. This wasn't part of her plan. Then, I started to sing. My voice was shaky at first, a fragile whisper that threatened to break. There's a picture in a silver frame. 2 little girls who share a name, one in the sun, one in the shade, a silent bargain slowly made. I sang about a house with cold, quiet hallways. I sang about being the wallpaper, seen but never noticed. I sang about the ache of invisibility, about learning to speak a language of silence because no one was listening anyway. The lyrics were simple, direct, and stripped bare of any metaphor. They were a confession. As the first verse ended, my voice found its strength. The fragility was replaced by a raw, unwavering honesty. The music swelled, the chords growing stronger, more insistent. I opened my eyes and looked directly at my mother. Her smile was gone. Her face was a mask of disbelief, her cheeks slowly draining of color. You gave her crowns. You gave her pearls. You gave her one of your perfect worlds. You gave me walls, a locked-up room, and told me flowers couldn't bloom in gloom. The room was now utterly still. The polite chatter had ceased. Forks were frozen halfway to mouths. Every single person was looking at me, then at my mother, then back at me. They were starting to understand. This wasn't just a song. This was testimony. My father was staring down at his plate, his face pale. He wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't look at my mother. He had retreated into his silence, his lifelong hiding place. Emily's perfect bridal smile had vanished. Her face was a storm of confusion and anger. Her new husband was whispering something in her ear, his expression tight with embarrassment. This was not the personal touch they had signed up for. The song built to its climax. My voice soared, filling every corner of that opulent room with a truth it had never heard before. I sang about the trophy hidden on a bookshelf, about the unheard melodies, about the pain that I had finally turned into strength. But in the dark, a seed can grow, a secret song that you'll never know. You built my cage, you set the bar, but you forgot to take my scars, and these scars know how to sing, of everything, of everything. I hit the final powerful chord, and the notes resonated in the dead silence. Then, my voice dropped to a near whisper for the last line. So, thank you for the spotlight, dear. It's so much brighter standing here. I played the last, fading notes, and let my hands fall from the keys. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It stretched for what felt like an eternity. It was thick with discomfort, with shock, with dawning realization. No one moved. No one breathed. For the first time in my life, I had the entire room's undivided attention. My mother was staring at me, her face white with fury. Her mask of the perfect hostess had shattered, and for a second, everyone in that room saw her for what she was. The mocking smile was a distant memory, replaced by a rictus of pure rage. Then, from a table near the front, someone started to clap. It was my old piano teacher, Mrs. Gable, whom I'd invited out of a sense of duty. Her eyes were filled with tears, and she was smiling at me with more pride than I had ever seen on my mother's face. Her solitary applause was joined by another, then another. An old family friend, a cousin, a few of my father's colleagues. It started as a trickle, then it became a wave, then a thunderous roar. The room erupted in applause. It was overwhelming, deafening, and it wasn't for the bride. It wasn't for the beautiful wedding. It was for me. I stood up from the piano bench, my legs shaking. I gave a small, shaky bow and walked off the stage. I didn't look at my family. I couldn't. I walked back to my table in a daze, the sound of the applause, following me like a physical force. When I sat down, the applause finally died down. An awkward, heavy silence fell over the room again. The wedding planner, her face a mixture of panic and professional composure, quickly signaled for the DJ to start playing music. A generic pop song filled the void, but it felt jarring and hollow. The spell was broken. The fairy tale had ended. No one came to my table. My family remained frozen at the head table, a perfect tableau of dysfunction. My mother was now engaged in a furious, whispered argument with my father, who looked like he wished the floor would swallow him whole. Emily was crying, not with quiet tears, but with angry, frustrated sobs, her face buried in her hands. Her perfect day was ruined. Guests started to leave. They came up to the head table, offered quick, awkward congratulations to the bride and groom, and made their excuses. Many of them shot glances at me as they left, looks of pity, of respect, of sheer, unadulterated shock. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, walked past my table and squeezed my shoulder. "That took courage, honey," she whispered, and then she was gone. I sat there for another 30 minutes, nursing a glass of water, watching the beautiful party crumble. I knew I should leave, but I felt rooted to the spot. I had thrown a grenade into the middle of my life, and I needed to see where the pieces landed. Finally, my father approached my table. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Lauren," he said, his voice hoarse. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Your mother, she's very upset." "I know," I said quietly. "You embarrassed the whole family." "Did I?" I asked. And for the first time, I looked him directly in the eye. Or did I just tell the truth? He had no answer for that. He just shook his head, a look of profound weariness on his face. "You should go," he said. "It's better if you just go." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an exile. I stood up. "Okay, Dad." I walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby of the country club, and into the cool night air. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. As I got into my car, I felt a strange lightness, a feeling I couldn't immediately name. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. It was something quieter, more profound. It was the feeling of a great weight being lifted, the weight of their expectations, their judgment, their silence. I had carried it for so long, I hadn't realized how heavy it was until it was on. I had spoken my truth and I had survived. More than that, I had been heard. I drove home with the windows down, the night air rushing in. For the first time, the silence in my car didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. It felt like my own. The next morning, I woke up expecting to feel a terrible hangover of regret and shame. Instead, I felt calm. I made coffee and sat in my sunny little kitchen. the silence of my apartment a comforting blanket. Then my phone started buzzing, and it didn't stop for the entire day. The first was a text from my Aunt Carol. "I'm so proud of you. Your mother has no idea what a gift she has in you. Call me when you're ready to talk." Then a message on social media from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "Lauren, what you did last night was the bravest thing I've ever seen. We all knew. We just never said anything. Thank you." Messages poured in from old high school friends, from my father's colleagues who had been at the wedding, even from some of the catering staff. They called my song brave, honest, powerful. They said they were moved to tears. It was a flood of validation from the most unexpected places. It was as if all the people who had stood on the sidelines of my life, watching the quiet injustice, were finally stepping forward to say, "We see you." And then there were the other calls. The first was from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, immediately, and again. On the fifth try, I answered, putting the phone on speaker and setting it on the counter. "Lauren Michelle, what have you done?" Her voice was a shriek, raw and stripped of all its polished elegance. "You ruined your sister's wedding. You humiliated me. You humiliated this entire family in front of everyone we know. How could you be so selfish, so cruel?" I listened, my hand wrapped around my warm coffee mug. I heard the words, but they didn't have their usual power. They didn't sting. They were just noise. "Are you listening to me?" she screamed. "I'm listening, Mom," I said, my voice even. "After everything I've done for you," she began, but her voice broke, choked with rage. "What have you done for me, Mom?" I asked, the question genuine. I waited. She had no answer. There was just the sound of her ragged breathing. "You are no longer my daughter," she finally spat, the words heavy with venom. A few years ago, that sentence would have destroyed me. It would have been the fulfillment of my deepest fear. But now, it sounded hollow. It sounded like the desperate last move of a queen who has already been checkmated. "Okay, Mom," I said softly, and I hung up. The next call was from Emily. She was sobbing hysterically. "You ruined my wedding," she cried, her voice thick with self-pity. "You made my special day all about you. You're so selfish, Lauren. You've always been jealous of me." "I'm not jealous of you, Emily," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. "I never wanted what you have. I just wanted to be seen. You're a horrible person." She sobbed, and she hung up. I sat there in my kitchen, the sunlight streaming through the window, and I felt a profound sense of closure. Their voices, the ones that had dictated my sense of self-worth for my entire life, no longer had any power over me. I had taken it back. Their anger and their accusations couldn't pierce the quiet peace I felt. I had finally spoken without saying a word they could argue with. My song was my truth, and they couldn't deny it or dismiss it. All they could do was rage against it, and their rage only proved how true it really was. I walked away from that family, not just from the wedding. I didn't answer any more of their calls. I didn't respond to my father's texts, which pleaded for me to be the bigger person and apologize to my mother. Apologize for what? For telling the truth? For refusing to be their joke any longer? No. I was done being the bigger person. I was done shrinking myself to make them comfortable. I poured myself into my teaching and my music. I started a small, after-school music program for kids who couldn't afford private lessons. I found joy in helping them find their own voices. I started performing at a local coffee shop on open mic nights, playing my own songs, the quiet, honest ones I had kept hidden for so long. People listened. They clapped. They told me my music moved them. I no longer played for applause, and I certainly no longer played for approval. I played for myself. I played because the music was a part of me. It was my way of making sense of the world, of turning pain into something beautiful. My music had given me freedom. I don't know what happened to my family's perfect picture. I heard through the grapevine that my mother's social standing took a hit, that people looked at her differently now. I heard that Emily's marriage was already showing cracks, that a life built on appearances is a fragile thing. I don't wish them ill. I just wish them nothing. They are characters in a story that I am no longer a part of. My story is my own now, and I am the one writing the music. If you have ever been silenced by your family, if you've ever been made to feel small so that someone else could feel big, I see you. Your story matters. Your voice has power. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Hit like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to sing your own song.